So today we're going to be presenting about our own culture, like everybody else. And the question that we're going to be answering or discussing today is, to what extent does our own culture's history influence our perception of other cultures?
So the first area of knowledge that we chose was religion, because religion can be something very important to a culture, and so differences in religion between different cultures can obviously have a large influence on how two different cultures perceive each other. Also, of course, history. People can really keep a grudge in a way, and so who was against who in what war, or who betrayed who, will have also a large, long-lasting impact on how the cultures perceive each other. For the ways of knowing, we first chose emotion, because having different cultures can evoke different emotions from each other, I think. And we can also use reason to create our own perceptions and opinions. Faith also, because it's related to religion, and so if someone has a strong faith and strongly believe in their own religion, then cultures of different religions, that'll also impact culture's perception.
So the two countries that we will be touching upon are Ireland and England, and how Ireland and England perceive each other and see each other, hence the overlap. So I'm sure you all know where Ireland and England are, but we decided to put this up because we wanted to show that even though Ireland and England are neighbouring countries, they never really acted in the most neighbourly, friendly fashion, and
So we're going to be starting with Ireland's perception of England, and there is a quote that I will read. An Englishman does everything on principle. He fights you on patriotic principles. He robs you on business principles. He enslaves you on imperial principles. This was by an Irish playwright, George Bernard Shaw.
So this shows an example of a criticism of the English by the Irish, of course. It's basically talking about how the English are very kind of stubborn and set in their ways, and though being principled is often seen as a positive thing, it's I view inner profile. In this case, the words he fights, he robs, he enslaves, this shows that this is really a negative quality, and so it's quite an obvious attack on the English.
and so we also have a quote from England's perception of Ireland, from Winston Churchill. We've always found the Irish a bit odd. They refuse to be English. So Winston Churchill was, of course, Prime Minister of England during wartime and slightly after wartime as well. And so he was a person of great power, and the fact that he said this shows that it could have been a lot of English people who thought this of the Irish. It also signifies that the English are quite stubborn and quite ignorant because they believe that they are superior to the Irish.
But why did they not like each other? So a little bit about the Anglo-Irish history. So after World War I, all the European countries kind of gathered together and all discussed the new Treaty of Europe and everything, and all the countries that would be included in there. And there was a Irish Republican Party called Sinn Féin that at this kind of meeting decided that they were going to offer the idea that Ireland should be separate to England, because at the time they were still together. They were seen as one country. So this proposition by Sinn Féin was ignored, and because it was ignored, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, kind of fired back, and on the 21st of January shot 2 policemen. After this incident happened, the British clamped down hard, and a guerrilla war began in County Cork. There are also other things such as Bloody Sunday in 1920. This is when the IRA shot dead 11 British agents, and in retaliation to this, the Black and Tans, called the Black and Tans, the British soldiers who come to Ireland dressed in black and tan, so they kind of got the name the Black and Tans, shot randomly at a crowd in a Gaelic football match. 17 civilians were shot dead. This was known as Bloody Sunday, not to be confused with the later Bloody Sunday, which was 10 days later when the IRA shot dead also 17 British soldiers. Later, Britain surrendered and gave Ireland a parliament, but the parliament, the Irish parliament, was still answerable to the British government. So when they wanted to pass new laws and things, they still had to go through England. So they kind of gave them a taste of independence without giving them real and full independence. It was only later until 1921 that Ireland became officially independent. This is also kind of similar to Canada's situation with the prime ministers and the parliament, because they were then separated from the states. And although this happened in 1921, the poster says 1966, so that could be quite confusing. Although this happened quite a while ago, the effects kind of rippled throughout, and it affected generations to go. So that's why still in 1966 in London in shops you could still see signs that would say no blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
So a real life situation of this was my uncle Fergus. He was Irish, and he moved to Brixton in about the 80s, the late 80s, early 80s. And even though this was about 60 years after the whole War of Independence, there was still a lot of distrust towards the Irish in England. And so when my uncle moved into his first apartment building, there were people in there who heard his accent, because of course the Irish accent is very distinct. There were people who heard his accent and attacked him with their words. They said, "Oh, go back to your home, you paddy." And paddy was used as a derogatory, discriminatory term because the English assumed that everyone in Ireland was called Patrick, which is a very common name. And it can be compared to ignorant people still today calling people of Middle Eastern origins by the name Mohammed and things like that.
So a period of time in our lives when we are very influential is during childhood. So childhood environment therefore strongly influences our perception of a nation. From a young age, two of the ways of knowing that we use are reason and emotion. So as a young child, we're very trusting of a lot of people. So for example, in a family, if your parents tell you, "Oh, the Irish are evil and the Irish are bad," and you have that drilled into your mind from a very young age from your family, then your emotion will tell you to trust them and that this is the truth, and that'll create a kind of basis for your perception of this other culture. Also taught in schools, you learn as a young child that everything your teachers say are true and you must trust your teachers and everything. And so, for example, in history classes, how history is portrayed in an Irish textbook versus in an English textbook could be very different and biased between the two opinions. So, as a child, the knowledge that we acquire during our childhood has a large influence on how we perceive other cultures.
So just to quickly touch on religion, as we were mainly focusing on the Anglo-Irish history, religion was more of a problem in the 1600s between England and Ireland, as England was mainly Protestant and Ireland was mainly Catholic, and Ireland is still to this day very, very Catholic. So this conflict within religion kind of laid down the roots for the tensions between England and Ireland, and which kind of fueled the flames as to why Ireland wanted to be separate from England, with of course many, many other reasons. And so because of the faith that these two countries had in their own religions, they had these conflicts between this.
So On the contrary, though, stereotypes and generalizations. So this is a picture to show how the Irish and the English can get along, and it's basically saying that a lot of opinions can be formed based on stereotypes. So even though we were saying in schools and by your family you can be very easily influenced by the thoughts that they're kind of pushing on you, a lot of the times these are stereotypes that have come through generations. And this is just saying that opinions instead can just be formed based on stereotypes and not really knowing truly how deep and how true they could be.
So in making this whole presentation, we came to a realization that though we're discussing stereotypes and generalizations of how cultures perceive each other, not only do these stereotypes and generalizations exist, but also how we perceive how other countries stereotype each other. And so just the interactions and the generalizations between two cultures can have an impact not only on themselves, but throughout the entire world. So knowledge that we acquire about other cultures will also have an impact on the knowledge acquired for the rest of the world.
So, in conclusion, and in answer to our question, to what extent does our own culture's history influence our perception of other cultures, we think that our own culture's history does indeed affect our perception of that culture and of the people of that in that culture through the way things are taught in the school, in the particular place that you're at, or in the way that your parents perceive these different cultures. And this isn't just in relation to England and Ireland, this is in relation to just about every other country, such as, and also other situations such as apartheid and things like
Guys, little question. If you talk about stereotype all the time, why didn't you use language as your way of learning?
So specific with